Episode 51, Cutting for Sign. Ryan Michler will be with us in a few moments.
Hmm.
Before we do, my name is Ron Cecil. I'm a men's coach based out of Portland, Oregon. You can find me on Instagram, rcecil, or simply go to my website, roncecil.com.
Or his bizarro website, sizzle.com.
Rsizzle is probably one of the most important websites ever in history.
I'm sorry. My nickname. I'm not the best nickname giver, man. I'm not the best. But
Yeah,
I dubbed you Romfire.
that's a good one. I really like Ron Fire a lot. I'm into that.
All right. 51, Ryan Michler. We are cutting for sign. And we're asking for support these days. If you want to support us, you can go to any of our episode descriptions, and there is in all capital letters a hyperlink that just says support. And you can offer us 99 cents a month, $5 a month, $10, whatever you want, and we'd appreciate it. What are we talking about today? Ryan Michler is all about masculinity, and I
Yeah.
feel like he's really picked his lane, and I do appreciate that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that though his delivery is 100% my personal style, but as I listen to him a little bit, I really like that he has his voice, he has his lexicon, his verbiage around things. He's confidently saying it. You can tell he believes in it. You can tell he lives it.
Yeah.
Those are extremes to varying extents probably, but to enough for me at least what I'm picking up on. And I do appreciate that, and I value that, and I think that that's kind of what you and I are in the process of doing, is finding our voice, finding our message, finding our values, and then being able to express them and then live them, which Lord knows there's a few people out there who would be like, Daniel, that you are full of shit, because I have definitely gone away from my values, and recently, it
Yeah.
happens, but it's always like coming back to center. And I think that's what we're finding.
I agree. I think he's got some great articulation, and I appreciate what he's trying to do out there. And I think that
Yeah.
there is like no lack of need. One of the things they teach you in a lot of business schools or marketing schools is to fight that feeling of like, well, so and so's doing something, so why should I do it? And realizing like everybody's voice is so valid because it speaks in a way, in a language, and a
Yes.
presence that is, kind of fits lock and key with certain people.
Awesome.
It's totally required. So I
Yeah.
appreciate that from him, and gives me a lot of honestly confidence, like watching him do it, because like everything you said, he's picked his lane, and it's evident. And when people pick their lane, like it's cool to see, no matter what
Yeah.
it is, right?
Yeah, especially if
Yeah.
they can still, if they're nice drivers, like they're in their lane,
Yeah.
but they're not flipping everybody else off that are in other lanes, or people that are kind of getting in it. I really,
Yeah.
because like it's like Schrodinger's cat is one of the best sort of little situations that's come out of the human mind, I think, is that the cat's in the box and it's out of the box at the same time, and we don't really know. There's the Schrodinger's cat thing. I don't know it in and out, inside and
Yeah.
out, no pun intended. But I do think that holding opposites, living paradox, is the ability to do that as a prefrontal cortex, specifically human trait, as I understand it. And it's something that
Hmm.
the more I do, I know the more you and I talk about it,
Yeah.
kind of the happier, the more well-rounded and relaxed our psyches are. And it's also can be a challenging thing to do when you pick your lane, because by definition, picking your lane means I'm not about this and that,
Yeah.
but those other thises and that's, still need to exist. And maybe they even have a little bit of influence on your lane still. And that's a challenging thing to balance.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd say I probably am a kind of a beginner, definitely beginner in the picking my lane. Like, because I've enjoyed such a broad, you've heard the phrase be a jack of all trades,
Yeah.
but a master of none. Actually, the way it was originally written was be a jack of all trades and a master of some. And
Really?
it's
Did you just make that up?
no, I didn't. No.
Really? That's
Y-
the original?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. And because you need like, really truly in your life, like 3 to 5 big things in your life that you're really good at, right? Like taking care of your health, taking care, like being in relationship, right? And it's probably the contextually about like, skills for work or something like that. But nowadays, man, you got to be able to you got to spin a few plates and have them going.
Yeah. I like that. I
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Now we're talking about a whole nother skill set, the ability to get good at several different things and take care of several different things without the whole, the
Yeah.
whole suffering.
Yeah.
Like I was telling you this morning, piano is important to me, but it's not. It's important, and if in another lifetime I would be a piano player.
Hmm.
So how do I represent this, but also not have it be a source of guilt because
Yeah.
I'm not doing it, and
Yeah.
and be a source of and how can it not take over my life by me doing it too much, giving it too much than its actual place? And as I was telling you this morning, about a month or two ago, I figured out, oh, I need to practice quality about 10 minutes a day. Well,
Yeah.
that quality and in a specific way that gets me to be better and that is fun enough. Well, that took work to do, but I figured it out. Now, 10 minutes a day, I look forward to playing piano. It's the way I like close the day out. I can't
Yeah.
wait to do it.
Nice.
And it's easy. And
Yeah.
also when I hit that 10-minute point, I usually want to keep going. And sometimes I do, but sometimes I'm like, boom, see you tomorrow. Shut
Yeah.
that thing and go to bed.
Yeah. I have had periods where writing is that, and I'm trying to get back into that again now.
Yeah. Well, that's
And
tougher because 10 minutes a day for writing that's not enough for you.
the one way I can keep it going is when I feel like I want to keep going.
Yeah.
And so like I where I'm ending, which is, an old Hemingway trick, like where I'm ending is where like I know there's more in me, a lot more to come out, and getting
Yeah.
to press the pause button on that and then come back to it the next morning.
That's a value, man. That's my old cross country coach used to say, my
Oh,
track
really?
coach. They used to say, finish. You want to be healthy and always maintain your health as a runner, finish feeling like you can do more. So cutting for sign a little bit today with Ryan Michler.
Yeah.
What's he call out in you? Like,
You know what's cool about Ryan is he caught my attention years ago. I mean, I don't know the number, but I'm gonna several years, and I've watched him be very consistent over time,
yeah,
and that's a value of mine, and it was something I really struggled with, and some of it's because I didn't have role models, some of it's because I didn't realize I had ADD, and so it's hard to like stick with something,
yeah,
and consistency into adulthood was difficult for me. And so I love that he is showing that with his world and listening to some of the, teachings he's done or conversations or any of those things. Like that's a value of his. And I don't know his exact journey of how he got there or how that value got into him. But when someone does that over time, consistent, steady pressure in the direction they want to go,
yeah,
it always, I don't want to say it always works, but damn, it is sure effective. Like
yeah. It seems like it'd be
yeah.
one of the most important things.
I'd love to kind of pick up how he knowing that he had a similar situation with dads as I did. We didn't have a
Yeah.
steady father figure. I'd love to kind of pick his experience, like hear his stories around some of that a little bit. So
Yeah.
that's what I'm
Maybe.
I'm looking for. What are you looking for?
Well, I think this one has been more meaningful for me around how it is meaningful for you. Because I know
Hmm.
he's kind of brought up a little bit of, would you say insecurity in your, for you? Or what would you say that is?
That's a good question. Yeah, we were talking about it earlier. Like, I mean, yeah, I like what Anne Lamott says about watching other writers get published and get more famous than she does, and she
Yeah.
just calls it jealousy.
She doesn't beat around
She
okay.
doesn't, and I've been trying to give myself more permission to like not beat around the bush around my emotions.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Just
so
call it what it is.
yeah, and so going, you know what, I'm jealous, but then also realizing, well, he deserves the success because he's not stopped working, and he's not stopped putting the steady, constant pressure into it, and also he's like providing great value to humanity right now in this part of the world. And it's a little bit in opposition to a lot of like I'd say popular thinking in culture, but we need that. I think we need that opposition sometimes,
It
and
seems
I'm
like
into that.
jealousy is a call to action. And I
Mm,
hear that you know
yeah,
that.
well
And it,
said.
it sounds like some of the things that he seems to be doing is are things that you're incorporating into your life and that haven't had the chance to bear the fruit because you're kind of like you were saying you're earlier in the process, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I am earlier in the process, but it like earlier in the sense that what did you say earlier today about kind of waking up after 20 years?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I'm only now realizing like how to really take care of myself
i
and how to
think that
really push towards things.
I think that there's things that the you and the Ryan Micklers of the world you each are building something
Yeah.
that he's a little further down the line in one or two ways, and you're a little further down the line in other ways. And a good friend of mine and a friend of yours, friend of the show, David
Mhm.
Robles, he was actually a guest with us with Steve Maxwell in
Yeah.
a good conversation
Yeah. It was good.
few months ago. He and I were always like, man, we're kind of like arrested development, Peter Pan syndrome.
Yeah.
It feels like that, but
Yeah.
I feel like what we're doing is really good, you know? And so we would always talk to ourselves like, I think we're building the foundation for when it's time to start building the outward thing, that it's going to go up fast and strong, you know?
Yeah.
And I feel like you have been doing that probably more than anyone I've ever met. And I think that what you're experiencing right now is the going up fast and strong, you know, right at
Yeah.
the beginning of it. It's really cool to see.
Oh, thanks, man. Appreciate that. I oh, I think that a lot of this gap is actually, now I'm thinking about it and wondering for you, is like I think I had to learn how to parent myself,
There you go.
and I had to learn how to like care and feed for myself in a real way. Is that because I was told, I was told like really weird shit as a child, and for some reason I was like, ignored a lot for my family. And I don't think because they didn't like me. I just think everyone was just so freaking overwhelmed with the life that they were leading that they
Yeah.
just didn't know how to handle,
Yeah.
like, oh, he's okay. He can just figure it out on his
Yeah.
own. Like
There's
that's
so much neglect going on.
time.
I think that I organize my thoughts around this. I think that if you in your position are looking to lead other people, it's so easy to jump into doing that
Mm.
and neglect. But then the truth is you're helping men, particularly, do something that you need to be really, really good at yourself, you know?
Yeah.
And so we were talking about that 20 years that we both kind of spent doing, you know,
Shadow
maybe,
careers, like
yeah,
shadow
shadow careers.
relationships.
Fuck
Yeah.
yeah, shadow relationships, shadow boxing, just shadow, lots of shade.
Yeah.
And then I was like thinking about all this time, and I'm like, man, I really feel like I'm so much more close, like at a tipping point of what
Mm.
I want in life, what I
Yeah.
have to offer, and how to actually do it. Boy, that was a long time to. It's easy to label it waste, you know, but then I really
Yeah.
think about it and look at it. I'm like, wow, every day of that was probably really valuable, you know, like
Yeah.
more valuable than if I arrived here 20 years ago, because I probably would have like injured myself or hurt others or just fizzled out or gotten misguided in what I had to offer, or how to offer it. You know, it's just like I think that you and I are really lucky to have arrived where we're at the age that we're at, you know.
Yeah. And I mean, I think there is luck for sure. And I think also knowing you for the last decade, that in a lot of instances, we've had to fight tooth and nail, man. Like we've had to dig to the deepest parts of our soul.
That's undoubtedly true.
And like as I'm just listening, I'm like, it's not without a ton of effort and a ton of pain that we've been through to uncover the part of us that we know we're capable of being. And sometimes it just takes us longer,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. You know, it's funny too. We were talking earlier today about authenticity, and
Yeah.
it just kind of came out of my mouth, but it's true. It's like I think I'm probably authentic about 5 minutes a day. You
What do you
know,
mean
like
that? Unpack that for me.
just like
Yeah. Like
truly,
unafraid, is that what you mean? Like,
fuck. I mean, like the thing that I said was exactly how I feel. I
yeah.
mean, the the presence, you know,
Mm,
presence. I'm really present.
mm,
Imagination, that I'm truly having an imaginative moment that is me,
yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and let alone expressing that through art or through my voice, you know, talking or whatever,
Hmm.
and moving my body where I'm actually relaxed and actually, you know, like we were watching Midnight Gospel, you and I independently of each other. Yeah. And there's that
Yeah.
last episode where Duncan Trussell's character is hanging out with Duncan Trussell's mom. He's hanging out with his mom, having
Yeah.
her on the podcast.
Yeah.
And she's like, have you ever have you ever felt inside your body? What's it feel like inside your body? You know, and
Yeah.
you were saying how you were practicing this
Yeah. I
afterwards.
tried it. Let's just listening.
And I just was doing that a little bit myself. And I was like,
Hmm.
oh yeah, inside my body feels good, you know,
Mm,
like inside an uninjured part of my body, inside my hand, you know? I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah. And I love the way he said it. It feels kind of like two magnets that want to be together,
Mm-hmm.
you know? I was like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it
Mm-hmm.
does feel like that. Kind of just a positive charge, you know, just a
Mm-hmm.
charge to it, a weight, a density, and a present. It's
Yeah.
nice. It's a good feeling. Go into an uninjured part of your body and just like put your mind there, and it's a warm, cozy place, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Probably if you did that on a little bit of shrooms or something, you would start to feel how it was to be in the womb. You know, it's a good feeling.
Yeah.
Warm, bloody, fucking, you know, healthy, vibrating, you know,
Yeah.
place. Well, I
Yeah.
was like, if that's happening all the time in my body,
Mm.
the fact that I'm not identifying it is probably one of the main reasons, and not putting my attention on it, that I just don't feel better all the time, you know, because
Yeah.
that's a consistent feeling in my body. And I think that's what she was getting at,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So you could probably go to a retreat, spend 3 weeks focusing on that, and level up your ability to just have that background running baseline feeling of good, healthy in your body,
Yeah.
that would then inform your life and your day as you go on. Do you know what I mean?
I do. I've been listening to On Being, the podcast hosted by Krista Tippett, and she had interviewed a guy named John O'Donohue in the mid 2000s before he passed away, and he talks about presence a lot. And I won't get into his talk, but I'll get into my experience listening to him, because I want more presence, because that presence is I'm here right now. My mind isn't somewhere else. It's not in a story about a future.
Yeah.
It's not in a fantasy about the past. It's here right now. And listening, I've had to listen to the thing 3 times because of how often I hear something that lands with me really well and makes me feel really impacted, and then immediately my mind immediately goes into how that might be beneficial in some other area of my life, and I start kind of playing that out in my life. And I mean, if I was, you know, more cognizant at the moment, I'd probably hit pause and then let myself do that. But I've instead right now, which I think is also good and valuable, is I notice that it's happening, and then I rewind it to go listen to what my brain didn't pick up right after he dropped that like little truth bomb on me.
That's some ninja shit, man. You've been doing that a lot lately. That's very cool. We'll hear more
It's
about that.
hard to do. I've noticed, like, when I noticed I read, my brain, I can be reading even out loud, and my brain can wander off somewhere else and start thinking about something
Oh,
completely
of
independent of
course.
my mouth moving. Like, how does that happen? I don't even know. But I've been noticing more and more, and I love the practice of being here right now. Hey, Ryan Michler's here. Shall
Hey,
we
all right.
let him in?
I guess. All right, here we go. Ryan Michler, you are a blogger, podcaster, husband, father, Iraqi combat veteran, and the founder of the Order of Man movement and podcast. You grew up without a permanent father figure and have seen firsthand how a lack of strong, ambitious, self sufficient men has impacted society. You believe many of the world's most complicated problems could be solved if men everywhere learned how to be better husbands, fathers, businessmen, and community leaders. It has now become your life's mission to help men across the planet step more fully into their roles as protectors, providers, and presiders over themselves, their families, their businesses, and their communities. Ryan Michler, welcome to Cutting for Sign.
What's up, guys? Glad to be here. Been looking forward to this conversation.
Awesome. Us too,
Awesome.
man.
Glad to
Yep.
hear that. Ryan, I gotta say, man, I'm proud and impressed with, and jealous. Let's just say that. Let's get that out of the way right away.
Don't
Of
worry
the
about that.
of the years and consistency that you have put into this, and watching it grow because of your consistency and effort. And
Okay.
that's impressive, man. Like, if we learn by watching and learn by example, like, you're doing it. So if I'm seeing that and stepping more into who I want to be, who I hope I'm capable of being, I'd imagine that there's a multitude of me's out there who are also doing it in their own ways. Do you ever feel
Yeah, I
that,
mean,
man? Do you ever feel that
I
like
hope,
impact of your consistency?
I know, I'll say it this way. I know it's consistency that makes it what it is. As far as the impact, I was at a hunt expo this last weekend, and to have people come up to you and say, "Hey, man, I've been listening to your podcast for the past, 4 years or five
Nice.
years or whatever it is. And, you really changed my outlook, or I've gotten in shape, or I've started a business, or I've fixed things with my wife, or I've connected with my kids." I'm like, man, Like that's a lot of responsibility. It's a weight that I'm proud to be able to attempt to shoulder. You know, I don't always do great with that, but I
What do you
don't
mean
know.
you
I don't
don't?
know how to answer your question. But I am proud for sure. I am
Yeah.
proud when I hear from people who are positively impacted by the work we're doing.
What do you
100%.
mean that you don't always do great with that?
Well, I don't always do great with realizing what we're doing because I don't know. I'm so committed, I guess, to what it is we're trying to accomplish that sometimes it's hard for me to look up,
Yeah.
Hmm.
you know, and
And see the results. Is that what you mean?
yeah, because
Yeah.
I care about the results, but I realized, and this goes back to your point about consistency, that in order to achieve the results, it's going to require consistency. Like, let me give you an example. So I just finished the first manuscript for our second book, and
Congrats.
I turned it into thank you very much. I
Yeah.
turned it into the publisher, and my wife was ecstatic about it. Hey, I'm so proud of you. I'm so excited. Congratulations. She's always been a great supporter of what I'm doing, regardless of what I'm doing. Well, not everything.
Yeah.
let's say that. Not everything.
Yeah.
But you guys get it what I'm saying. Anyways, and she's like, "Are you excited?" And I'm like, "I don't know, not really. Like, I'm ready for the next thing." And she's like, "Why
Yeah.
can't you just celebrate?" I said, "We just have so much work to do." You know, so it's hard
Yeah.
at times for me to look up and think, "Oh, we've done it," or "We're
Yeah.
doing it." I don't know if we
Yeah.
are. Like, I'm just doing it, and I'm going to keep doing it regardless of the outcome.
How would you measure your success then? Out of curiosity, like if you
Through my work.
when you get to your deathbed and you're thinking about it, like what do you want to feel about this?
Did I give everything it required?
Yeah.
You know, everything. I don't care if 10 people listen to my podcast or 10 million people listen to my podcast.
Yeah.
Well, that's not fair. I do want,
Yeah, sure.
want more people to listen because I know it will serve them,
Yeah.
but I don't measure it by that. I measure by everything I gave to it. And if I
Mhm.
fell short of that, then I fell short regardless of the outcome. But I know based on past experience that the outcomes will always take care of themselves, right? Like, if you want to pull a 500-pound deadlift, go do deadlifts. Like, inevitably you'll be able to pull 500 pounds. If you want to grow a podcast, like all of us are growing here,
Yeah.
then podcast, and it will take care of itself. If you want to build your relationship, then work on communication and work on being open and work on sharing your feelings and being committed to that person, and the relationship will work out. Like, the results will take care of themselves. So many guys focus so heavily on the results, and that's a problem because we have this false sense of reality or expectations about what it takes. And so what we do is we say, all right, let's go back to the deadlift, for example. I want to pull 500 pounds this year. Okay, well, what if you blow out your knee?
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you a failure? No, you're not a failure. Like, you didn't hit your 500 pounds yet. You're not a failure. You may have failed, but you're going to need to go back to the drawing board. You're going to need some rehabilitation on that knee. You're going to need to build your strength back up, and you're going to get back on track. And so what a lot of guys do, because they have a false sense of expectations about what it takes to build strength or build wealth or start a podcast or start a business, is they don't give themselves enough time to achieve the inevitable result.
Yeah.
Because they're delusional about what it'll take, and then they throw in the towel too soon.
Big time. And if you are, you know, are anywhere on the spectrum of ADD, then your perception of time is wildly off.
Yeah. Well, and I think I agree.
And I say that as a person who didn't know he had ADD until I was almost 40.
Well, I agree with you because I'm right there with you. And based on my conversations with very highly successful people, a lot of these guys are two things: ADD, meaning they chase that bright and shiny object.
Yep.
And it's very fleeting. Like, oh, that sounds interesting. Oh, now this. Oh, now that. Oh, now this. Or they're super obsessive, like ultra obsessive. They just get obsessed over this thing, and both can serve you and both can hurt you, you know? So it's about harnessing both or either for productive outcomes, whatever you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead, Daniel.
Go ahead. No, you're good.
You know, I think that I've had some success in certain areas of my life that felt kind of accidental, you know, jobs, leading businesses, leading companies. And then there were certain things in my life that I had always wanted to do. And one of those was I started rock climbing when I was 17, and probably because of the passion I felt at the time, had gone to I should have gone to Yosemite and like just lived there for a while and gotten my, the yucks out of me, right? Like just done it and got it out of my system. And instead, like I had a midlife crisis, a few years ago of like, oh my gosh, there's some unfinished business I have. And I think it was Grant Cardone's book, 10X, one of those, things.
Yeah.
And I was like on a Southwest flight coming back from a conference for a job I had at the time. And he's like, are you pursuing consistently that thing inside you that you've got to accomplish? And I, to your point, you gave a little talk on self-care recently. And I knew that pursuing that was going to be kind of like loving a part of me that needed to know it wasn't neglected anymore. And the way he described it was saying like, write down everything you know, and then write down everything you don't know. And then there's a third column for the things you don't know.
Right.
And on the airplane, I wrote those 3 columns out. I left one column blank. And it was at that moment I realized how much I did not know and what was going to be required of me to go complete that. And it took me, the better part of a year of consistent, lot of training, 3 to 5 days a week of 2 to 3 hours of work and exercise and training. And I did it. And it was like,
Congrats, man.
Yeah, thanks, man. It was really hard. The training was really hard, but at that moment I realized like, holy moly, if I can continue to apply the same kind of thinking and the same kind of consistency to other areas of my life, I can begin to put this together. Daniel, what were you about to say?
Oh, well, actually, before I do that, how would you say that you're in the middle of another push toward like is it El Capitan, right?
Yeah. Are you talking to me? Are you talking to me, Ryan? Yeah.
You. Are
Yeah.
you in the?
No, not
are
me.
You like,
not me. That ain't me.
Are you fully
That's
in?
you, bro.
Are you fully in like, are you fully in the adventure of training, quote, 3 to 5 times a week for the next El Capitan?
Yeah. Yeah.
Would you say that you're
definitely.
all in,
Like right
committed?
now, at this point in my life, it's like more like, 7 days a week and, hours a day of pushing towards my life.
It seems like it. It's interesting and very cool to connect that.
Yeah.
Let me say one thing on that, guys. Like, so one of the questions I get quite often from people is, Ryan, if you could do anything in the world, what would it be?
Yeah.
And I hate that question because
fly like Superman.
I can. No. Like, I think what they're looking for is like, what are your big aspirations,
Yeah.
And so like, it's not fly necessarily, but it's like legitimate. Like, what are your aspirations? Number one, I can do anything I want to do, just like you can.
Yeah.
And number two, I'm doing it. And so anybody who's asking those questions is somebody who knows they want to do something, but they aren't doing it. And they're coming up with a bunch of reasons. And, Ron, I don't know your reasons, but you had reasons you weren't doing it before. There was excuses and justifications and rationalizations, and something on that flight switched for you, whether it was reading that book or hearing something in a new way or looking at it from a different perspective. And now you're answering the question. And we should all be answering the question. There's so many people out there who, they get up every morning because the alarm goes off and, maybe they get a shower in, shave, and maybe they grab a bite on the way out. They sit in traffic for up to 2-3 hours at a time. They go into an office, they hate their work. They come back, they pat their kids on the head. They, maybe try to give their wife some maybe attention. And then they go to sleep and they do the same thing over and over again. It's like, you can do everything you want to do, and you actually have to be in the process of pursuing it. So I don't like that question, but when guys ask me, I feel for them a little bit. I'm like, what the hell are you doing with your life?
Yeah.
If you weren't answering that question for yourself.
I notice a lot of that comes for me, a lot of the reason and those excuses, whatever the reason was, it came down to a lack of imagination, a lot of blind spots, a lot of neglect, a lot of corrosion covering up the real answers. And I know all of that's kind of vague, but really coming up with those answers was quite a process. And a lot of it was digging back into what I really wanted at other ages, other times in my life, and then going, oh yeah, I forgot that dream. Why? Oh, that was a legit reason. I actually don't care about that. Okay, cool. Put that one aside. What about this dream? Oh yeah, no, I fucking still want that. but I kind of want a different version of it. And then you got to sit down and do a little bit of work and create it and figure it out, and that's what that process has looked like and continued to look like for me. But it sounds like, Ryan, maybe for you, it's been a little clearer this whole time, or what?
No, never. It's never clear. You just charge for it.
Nice.
But I want to ask you something about that. One of the things you said, and look, I can't tell you what you believe. Like, I can't tell you, I disagree with what you believe, but I would question whether or not it's an imagination or whether it's more of sedation. Like, I've never met a guy who doesn't have some sort of ambition or dream for the future. That's imagination, right? You're thinking about what could possibly be. But what we do, like, here's a good exercise. Go ask 10 people. Hey, if you could do, like, that question, if you could do anything you ever wanted to do, anything you ever wanted to dream of within reason, that was actually feasible.
Yeah.
What would it be? And then the 10 people you ask would give you an answer, right? And then out of their mouths, the very next sentence would be, but ...
Yeah.
So it's not imagination, it's sedation, right? We sedate ourselves with drugs and alcohol and pornography and a paycheck and social media and politics and all of this other bullshit. And it keeps us from following through on our imagination. I've got 4 kids from the ages of 13 down to 5 years old. They're all imaginative. That doesn't go away just because you hit 40 years old. You did something to subdue it. There's something in your life that's sedating that's tampering the imagination that we have.
Yeah.
And I think that's the challenge most guys have, because everybody has a dream, but they always backfill it with, but I have responsibilities, but my wife, but my kids, but this, but I live here, but I have this debt. Like, when we moved out here, my wife and I and our 4 kids moved out here to Maine from Southern Utah. I had a bunch of people say, oh, well, I really wish I could wish I could move, and I wish I could do. And they weren't being mean spirited.
Yeah.
I'm like, bro, you can do that. And you know what they said? Oh, I have debt. My wife, this, my kids, that. I'm like, I had all that stuff too. Man, we left our home, and that was the home that my wife's grandfather built.
Wow.
We had our wedding reception there. My brother-in-law, her brother had their wedding reception there. Her parents had their wedding reception there. Her grandfather died in that home. Like we had friends. Our kids had friends. We had reasons to be there. And yet we made the decision and overcame the obstacles to make something else happen.
Yeah.
What do you think is below the layer of sedation? I agree that we're all sedating ourselves. Like, it's the easiest, most accessible way to avoid things we want to avoid in our life. And what do you think is, like, below that for folks, for most people?
Fear. It's emotion. Right? Like, what if, okay, so you want to move across the country, right?
Yeah.
You want to climb El Capitan. Okay. That's some scary shit, man. I don't like heights. I don't want to climb up the face of a rock. I don't want to die. I've got a lot of things that I want to do that are at odds with climbing up the face of this rock. Okay. Just like you, like, we're no different. You have that too.
Yeah. By the way, I'm also afraid of heights. Believe it or not.
Right. That's the point. I'm like, you have the same fears I do.
Yeah.
Right. We all have the same fears. And so now, look, there's, on one end of the equation, there's like, that's not an interest of mine. Okay. Like, it's not something I'm interested in. It doesn't make it any less or better or whatever. But on the other end of the equation, there's guys who say, I am interested in that, but the fear is what gets to them. And so instead of facing the fear like men, they choose to sedate themselves with all of these things I just told you about, whether it's drugs, porn, alcohol,
or responsibility,
whatever.
right? Like, work, bury yourself in work, bury yourself in a shitty job, bury yourself in whatever.
They're called noble obstacles.
Yeah. That's good. I heard you say that before. I like that a lot.
Those are the the noble obstacles are the easiest.
Because everyone else is going, good job, work more.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, you're doing what you're supposed to be. Because if I said, hey, I'm an alcoholic, I'm a raging alcoholic, and I'm addicted to crack, everybody'd be like, you're a loser.
Oh, Ron was also that, not the crack part.
I mean, in all honesty, 8 years tomorrow will be 8 years alcohol free.
Congrats.
Thanks.
Congrats. But like, everybody everybody probably, acknowledged that was not a good thing for you, including yourself, right?
Yeah. I mean,
Well,
kind of. I
except
was
for
good
your
at hiding that
alcoholic
shit. I was
buddies.
really good at sneaking it around and all that stuff. But
Sure.
once it
But
came
if
up,
they
it was like,
knew,
yeah, yeah,
right.
yeah. You know,
But if you said, "Hey, I can't go climb El Capitan because, I've got this job. I just started this job and, I don't really want to ask for time off. I just started this career." And, everyone's like, "Oh yes, good boy. That's a good decision.
yeah,
Yeah. You're doing the right thing." So those are the noble obstacles that are easy because everybody else will cheer you on. Nobody's
totally.
going to cheer you on except for your drunk buddies for being an alcoholic.
Yeah, yeah. The reason I asked about what was below the sedation
Sedation.
was because in my early days, I mean, I got to a point where I finally understood that all of the rowdiest disagreements between my wife and the moments I really lost my shit with my kids, who were little at the time, were preceded with some volume of alcohol. So it
Mm.
made sense to me. Like, hey, let's stop this. And I asked a friend, like, what do I need to do to stop? And he's like, have you tried this thing called AA? I was like, as if there was some magical thing. And I was just kind of tired of like trying to figure it out on my own. And I went. And the first thing I heard was, hey, if you're really serious, you need to come 90 times in 90 days. It's a
Mm.
non-negotiable.
Wow.
Every single
Yeah.
day for 90 days, no matter what. Doesn't matter if you're sick, doesn't matter if your family's sick, you will figure it out. And in that time, which I feel like was one of some of the best healing and reflective and transformative times of my life, I heard someone say, few of us really have a drinking problem. Many of us have life problems, and we don't know what to do with those life problems. And alcohol is the fastest way to remove ourselves from the constant pressure of not knowing what to do with life.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Mm.
And I mean, so the question was a little loaded. Like, what do you think is underneath the sedation? And I
Well,
think that you're completely right. Like, it's life. Like, we don't know what to do. We're scared as hell of heights, of leaving the job, of getting out of a relationship that we know deep down is not for us, of stepping into something that we know is going to require something from us that we've never been able to give. Like
or
90 days.
potentially, if you even have all of those things go together, it could be just the existential crisis of being alive, just the underlying fuck, I'm in a body that's going to die. Like
Yeah.
that. We were watching the show. Have you heard of the show Midnight Gospel, Ryan?
I haven't.
It's pretty good. It's an animated Duncan Trussell, comedian. He has a podcast. Um, and then he did something really unique where he takes the episodes of the podcast, edits them, and then animates a story over them. And so the audio of the show is his podcast, and this is on Netflix.
Oh, interesting.
But the visual is this crazy psychedelic experience
so
of him and
crazy.
the character,
Yeah.
like going. It's really interesting. Well, on the last one, he has his mom on, and he has like Anne Lamott, and he has Dr. Phil is one of them. They have a conversation about drug use. It's excellent. But in one of the episodes, they just talk about, they get pretty deep into just the challenge of being alive, and I think that, Ronald, to your point, and Ryan, to yours, that feeling, that escape from that you use, maybe Ron used for a while in drinking, that can be a phone addiction, right? That can be like all the things you listed, of course, the low-hanging fruit: porn and drinking, drugs, love, negative emotional attachment. But it's really nice personally to start to put these things down. And for me, over the last few years, as I do, one thing falls away after another. And that it's not a coincidence that clarity of imagination comes as a result of those things starting to fall away. And it's one of the most liberating things I've ever experienced. So that's why I say imagination, because my imagination is coming back when I ask myself that question. Holy shit, I can do anything I want. Like, I really feel like I can do anything I want. So what do you come up with? And then now that the distractions are falling away, I'm coming up with some answers that are interesting. And then you go, oh, awesome, I'll do that. But then 5, 6, 7, 10 days later, I'm like, actually, no, this is even better. And then it's a kind of compounding experience of getting really clear of possibility, and it's liberating. I fucking love it.
Yeah, man. I look, I commend you. That's awesome. You know, one thing that I'm thinking about, and I'm taking notes. I'm not like checking my text, like I'm writing stuff down. I was writing that. What is it? Duncan Trussell, Midnight something?
Midnight Gospel. I don't know if
Midnight
it'll be your
Gospel.
taste,
Gospel.
but he's a Joe Rogan
Maybe. I
guy.
don't know.
He's a
Yeah.
legit dude.
I know
It's
of
out there.
him, but yeah, I'll have to check that out. But the other thing I wrote down here is you were talking about imagination. And I think, you know, I think what we have to do is we have to couple that with courage. You know, because
Well
when
said.
you
Yeah,
start
really
to
well said.
imagine, yeah, I mean, when you start to imagine about how things could be, you know, and it's different than what they are, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's you have a powerful relationship with your wife, for example. Let's take that. But maybe things are on the rocks right now, you know, and you guys are struggling and there's a lot of vitriol and animosity and contention in the relationship, but you imagine in your mind this relationship that you had when you first met her and when you guys were in love and things were good. Well, the next step is courage, right? Like you have to have enough courage to maybe it's share the vision with her, or maybe you need to forgive her, or maybe you need to ask for forgiveness from her for some things that you've done. Like there's some things that are happening and it takes courage. And the beautiful thing about it is that when you exhibit courage, it unlocks more imagination.
Yeah, nice.
Right? Because courage leads to results and you're like, oh shit, this is possible. Like I actually can have a loving relationship with my wife. What if not only is it loving, like what if we're living it to its fullest?
Yeah.
And now we're going on vacations and we're having kids and we're tackling real world problems together and we're creating experiences. And that derived from first imagination and second, the courage to do something about that imagination you're experiencing.
Yeah.
And to be clear, courage is, I'm going to give my paraphrased definition, is doing it even when you're scared shitless.
Agreed.
Yeah.
It's not correct. You know, like you'll hear people say, oh man, you know, you ran a marathon and people are like, oh, that's so brave. That's so bold. That's so courageous. And it's like, no, I ran 40 of them already. Like that didn't take any more effort than what I've done. Like courage is not fear not being there at all and doing something that other people would think is courageous. It's being scared as shit and doing it anyways, which is why courage is subjective. You know, so we see a guy who, you know, maybe he's on his 5th combat deployment and we think that's courageous. And maybe it is, or maybe, you know, what would be more courageous for that guy is to retire and go be with his wife and kids. But he's scared as shit of doing that.
Yeah.
He's not scared of combat. He's scared of being a civilian.
Yeah.
So which is more courageous?
Yeah.
It's subjective.
Ryan, have you experienced less fear as time has gone on? Do you have areas that have been particularly challenged other than heights, been particularly challenging for you that you face potentially on a daily basis? And if so, do you mind talking a little bit around that?
I experience less fear with the things that I used to be fearful of, as long as I'm working towards those things.
That's awesome.
So, you know, like jumping on a podcast, for example, I didn't have any sort of fear or nervousness as I jumped on this podcast with you.
Yeah.
When I record an interview with somebody else, you know, maybe a little bit, if I have like some, you know, big name, high caliber guest on, I might exhibit a little bit of that. But I know that, you know, I'm prepared. I know I can ask good questions. We can have a meaningful conversation. But I've conquered that fear, you know. But there's other fears that I have, like writing a book. You know, that's not a medium I'm totally comfortable with. And so actually the second book that I wrote that I was mentioning earlier, I'm more worried about this book than I was my first.
Why is that?
And I think I care more about it. I think I know the stakes. You know, like before I didn't really know the stakes. Well, I just threw it out there and I was like, I don't give a shit if anybody likes it or not. Like, this is something I want to put out there and that's cool. And now I'm like, no, I want to make New York Times. You know?
Yeah.
Like I want to put something out there that's going to be mainstream, that's going to serve as many people as possible. And so I've placed this extra burden on myself, which I don't think is bad. Like, I think it's good that you place extra responsibility on yourself. And the fact that I'm worried about it means that I care about it. So, you know, I have fears around the things that I'm not totally comfortable with, just like anybody else, you know.
I know Ron is in the middle of a book writing process, and He was actually just reading a scene for me a little earlier today, which was cool. And curious, just this is kind of a little bit of a pivot, but your writing practice, what does that look like? Has that been challenging to work in? You have children, you're married, you have an empire of podcast and Order of Man. That's a lot. How did you work writing in, and what did that look like?
Yeah, man, it sucked. Like,
Awesome.
I
Yeah.
don't like writing. I don't enjoy the writing process. I don't enjoy it. Like, I wish I could tell you, oh, it was amazing, and you do these things and it's beautiful and everything gets easier. And it was like grinding for me.
Mm.
So what I decided to do is that I had a pretty good outline, but I'm going to write this book in 60 days. I'm going to write 60,000 words in 60 days. That's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Because I know about myself, if I put it off and I say, hey, I'm going to write 60,000 words in 12 months, like, I'm not going to do that. Like, there's no way. But if I say 60 and 60, yeah, I'm going to do that. 100%.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
So I wrote, my goal was to write 1,000 words per day. And I averaged about 12 to 1,300 words per day. I missed some days, admittedly.
Yeah.
But I always caught up for them, always. And so I hit 60,000 words, I think, on day 55 or 56, somewhere right in there. And my goal was that's what I did. I just wrote, regardless of how I felt or if I wanted to or if I didn't want to. Like, I just wrote, and we put together what I think is a pretty good book, but time will tell.
Can you say the
I
title
don't get
of
to
it yet?
decide that. No, I can't. I wish I could tell you. I can't tell you that yet. We're very,
That's
very
fine.
close, but I
Yeah.
can't disclose that just yet.
That's great, man. Congrats on that, dude. That's a big deal.
Thank you.
That's a really
Yeah,
big
thank
deal.
you.
Yeah, I've had the experience of writing both a screenplay and now this piece of fiction that I had to do exactly the same thing. It was 90,000 words in 90 days, and I had to just freaking like pound it out
Rank it. Yep.
and like there is this effort that you don't feel like it's there, and then you put a day in, and then another day in, and then another day in, and then suddenly you've got those words. And if you can aim, like you talked about it, for that like 12 to 1,300 words, sometimes like just let it go. Got it.
Yeah.
Makes some momentum. That's
There's
great.
a Pablo Picasso. It's not a quote because I'm not going to quote it, but the gist is, how people will go like, "Oh, I like to work when I'm inspired." I like to,
Oh, yeah.
I work when I'm inspired. He goes, "Yeah, I like to work when I'm inspired too. I usually find inspiration when I'm working." And I was like, man, I go back to all the time. Seriously, like I have been in the deadest creative times in my life, and then approached either in my writing career, which is past, or in painting, which is present. Total uninterest in writing or painting, and then sitting down and for whatever reason making myself do it. And I've had some of the best sessions, and those sessions always leave me thinking, Jesus Christ, how much time have I lost thinking that I just wasn't a day to write or a day to paint, when I could have created that within 20 minutes. You know what I mean? That transition. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I learned through the first book I wrote and this one as well is that, if I have a goal of 1,000 words, for example, the hardest words to write are the first 200 or so.
Yeah, for sure.
That's right. Right.
And then when you get past those first 200, it's like, oh yeah, man, I caught a storyline, or I remembered that one experience that I had 2 years ago that ties in perfectly to this scenario. And then there's also one other tactic that I learned or utilized in writing, and I've used it in other facets of my life, is that I never came to a blank page, like never. And what I mean by that is I would write, for example, I'd write a chapter, and let's say I closed out the chapter at 1,000 words, maybe 1,100 words. I closed out the chapter. It would be very easy just to like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Close out the chapter, 1,100 words, I'm done. And then come back tomorrow to chapter 13. But instead of doing that, what I did is I'm like, okay, close out that chapter. I'm in the flow. Like, let me just write 2 paragraphs of chapter 13, or let me write 5 bullet points that I'm thinking of. It may not be it, but let me just write those down. And then when I came back the next day, I've already got 2 paragraphs written, or I've already got 5 bullet points that I can riff on.
Yeah, that's
and
crafty.
I do the same thing with my work. So I've got this planner that I use every single day, and I plan religiously, non-negotiable, every single morning and every single night. So when I come in tomorrow morning, we're recording this on a Monday. When I come in on Tuesday morning, like, I don't have to think about what's going to be done. It's already written down. Like, I've already got it documented in here.
Yeah.
and I'm just hitting the ground running. Now, some things might change, right? I might get an email that needs to be addressed, or maybe somebody needs to bump their schedule around, or like I did with you guys, I'm like, hey, I got to meet 20 minutes later than I said,
Yeah.
so you can adjust, but it doesn't force you to restart every single day. It's seamless. You just keep moving along as you go.
Now, Ryan, does that,
Dude,
sorry, go ahead, Ryan.
I'm gonna run with this, Daniel.
Jump.
So hold on to that one.
I was doing the same, I think, my man.
I mean, it sounds like you were listening to Daniel I talk before you jumped on, because we were talking about the need to continue momentum, and we were talking specifically around writing for me in particular. And I try to do the same thing. I try to leave some reserve in the tank, so I know where I'm going, and it's carrying me. But really and so I just want to affirm that that's awesome. Thank you for saying that, because it keeps me on the path.
Yeah.
But what I was really kind of excited about is we asked ourselves on air, like, what are we looking for? Cutting for sign. What's the clue, right? And I said, I am realizing how much more planning and structure I need in my life, and I've got a lot, but my brain needs even more. And I saw you pick up your planner. I have one too, and I do it every morning, but I don't do it every night.
Yeah,
and
do it every night.
And
man.
Some days, dude, I can spin out for a couple hours in the morning, and it feels completely wasted. So, could you talk a little bit about like how you came up with that? Is it your system? Is it someone else's? Is it just you figured it out ad hoc over time? Like, I'd love to hear what you do, man.
It's my system now. Like I don't know where I got it from. I don't know. I probably didn't learn it from one individual, but to say that I created it entirely myself would definitely be a lie. I looked at what other people were doing. We've had 300 and I think 20 or so guests on the podcast. Like,
awesome.
What are they doing? How are they being successful? And so over, this is a planner I've been using now for about 7 years through the culmination of work and what's worked and what hasn't. And it's not perfect. And the people that use it, I think they get value from it. And other people are like, this is stupid. Right. Because you got to find something that works for you. So I don't make any qualms about that. But what I do is I'll write out my entire list of things that need to get done. And then I'll just leave a blank, like a empty checkbox right by it.
Yeah.
And then when I start the thing, I just put one dash through it, So for example, if I need to call somebody, I'll put just one diagonal dash through it. When I get a hold of that person and that task is complete, then I'll put the other diagonal dash and exit out.
That's crafty. I like that.
That's good.
Yeah. So
That's
I
funny.
know that the things, go ahead.
Well, just a side note to that. I don't want to interrupt. I have noticed that I'm a list guy. A lot of times one thing will lead, I'll start it, but I didn't finish it, but I kind of want credit for starting that fucking thing on my list.
Sure.
And also I want to see something so I don't keep going back to it and thinking I need to do it. So thank you. That's a nice little trick. I like that.
It is. I mean, it's important to give yourself wins, and it's important to know that, I couldn't get that thing done, but I did my part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of external circumstances beyond our control. Like if I'm going to call you guys, I can call now, whether you pick up, that's on your end. I can't do anything about that.
I learned recently that list makers, it's a dopamine. I'm sure you know this, but it's a dopamine hit when you check something off the list. I love learning that. Yeah.
And then when you look at your entire list and know that you started it and or finished it, that's a pretty rewarding experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you plan your month out before you start a month or your week?
I plan in 90-day segments, and that's what I've been teaching the guys that we work with. So we hit 4 main categories of life, and I say, I want you to come up with an objective in each one of these categories. And then I want you to backtrack into a daily tactic that you can complete on a daily basis.
Yeah.
That will inevitably lead you to your result. Now so that's what we call our 12-week battle planning system. But then there's other things that need to get done on a daily basis that don't always correlate to getting those things done.
Yeah.
And those are just, your to-do items, like making a phone call or putting out a fire. Maybe a little fire comes up and you gotta make a couple of calls or talk with a couple of people, so those are different than what we call tactics, which is leading you to your objectives that you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. That's excellent, man. Appreciate you sharing that. Thank you. I got what I came
Yeah.
for.
Yeah, a good
Done.
strong
Let's
log
wrap it
game.
up.
I think a strong log journaling situation is, I love that there's so many iterations of them out right now, and I do think that it's important to empower. What was important for me to not think that every log or journal situation that was being sold was the way to do it. I ended up having to take about 4 or 5 years of crafting my own, and literally
Mhm.
ruler on a piece of paper and, making. It was a game changer for me to finally find a journal that had removable pages, so I could move pages out and stick them in different orders, so I could let the areas of my life that I wanted to prioritize come to be the first pages that were there. That shouldn't be a big deal, but it was for me. Okay, cool. Got that piece in place. And then several
Yeah.
iterations of accountability and habit tracking that, those don't really work. Oh, this works. And now it's just like, man, it's such a huge tool.
Ryan, I know
Yeah, I mean,
that
you got
you're,
to create something
yeah,
that works well for you. That should be
yeah,
any facet
totally.
of life, right? Is
Yeah.
take it. That's why when you guys said, "Is that yours?" I'm like, "Yeah, it is. It's mine." Because I
Yeah,
Yeah,
took it
I
from
hear you.
wherever it came from and I made it
totally.
my own, just
Yeah.
like you
Yeah.
should with anything.
Yeah. That's solid. That's super solid. You're a super active guy. You roll what, 5 days a week still? You doing that?
Yeah, yeah, 4 to 5 days a week. Yeah.
Nice. That's awesome. And I'm sure you're training in there too and all that stuff. Tell me about what you do for your brain. Like, do you
Hmm.
have any kind
Good
of
question.
meditation or any kind of journaling or any other place where there is nothing going on and it allows your brain to defrag, allows your brain to like just process whatever it needs to process. Some people do that on long runs, some people do it in the sauna. A lot of us have that kind of those like moments in the shower where our brain finally it dawns on us what's going on, and
Yeah.
and we get those little downloads. I found a lot of value in the practice of everything I just said in a 15 to 30 minutes, sometimes an hour long daily, every single day has to happen, non-negotiable time. What and that's for me, right? I can't say that's prescriptive to everybody. I don't know if it
Sure.
is for everybody, but what for you? What do you do for your brain? What do you do for your conscious and subconscious coming together?
Well, I mean, it's been the writing up to this point because a couple
Hmm.
of weeks ago I finished up the book. So even just being able to write and
Yeah.
jot down my thoughts and flesh through these ideas, that's been therapeutic for me. Outside of that, every single morning, that's part of my daily planning is visualization.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I come in here, I sit down. The first thing I do is like, what's today going to go like? What
Hmm.
do I want to do? What do I
Hmm.
want to accomplish? How do I want, even more importantly than that is like, how do I want to feel at
Yeah.
the end of the day? There's a good question by Gary Keller in his book, The One Thing.
Huh.
He's like, have you guys read that book?
No, no,
No.
but I'm writing it
Oh,
down.
I love that book. So the whole premise of the book is basically what's the one thing that you could do today that you would either, consider a success or would render everything else unnecessary.
Hmm.
Huh.
So at the end of the day, if there was one thing you did today, whether it
Yeah.
was this podcast or
Yeah.
wrote your 1,000 words
Yeah.
or secured a new pot, like what's the one thing that if you just tapped out today, it would still be a success for you?
Yeah. That's a great question.
That's
That's a
solid.
cool question
Yeah.
Yeah.
because we
I
can't
love
do
that.
everything. There's like so much to do. And so what it does is it helps us to prioritize what's going to move the needle the most efficiently for us.
It reminds me a little bit of this habit that I started doing about 2 years ago, and I just called it a crush it list because I was getting really frustrated with having things on old lists, big lists, like life lists that weren't done. And some of the things on these lists were not huge tasks, they weren't all write a book, and so I was like, fuck this. I was starting to get really mad. And I wrote this list and I put on everything that I could do in one day that I'd been putting off.
Hmm.
And I just said, I woke up in the morning and I was like, today's going to be miserable because I'm going to do stuff all day long that I don't want to do. Now, first of all, I was wrong about that. It was one of the best days of my life. And those days have since been the best days of my life because every single time you do one of those things, it's miserable for about 10 minutes. And then you're in it and you're exhilarated and then you're done. And that's even more exhilarating. And then you do confront the next one. I don't want to do this, especially now that you feel good from doing the last one. You're like, fuck
Mhm.
it. Today's a good day. Nope. This is a crush day. and I would smash that fucking list, man. And
awesome.
dude, those, it were like warp days. They would move my life
Mm.
forward exponentially more than any grinding that I would do. And so I have since incorporated them into once a week. And a funny little story, I was telling a friend of mine about that. This is about 2 years ago. And I was excited about it. And I was like, God, I wish I could just do one of those every day or maybe even once a week. And he was like, oh, you can't do that, you know? And then I thought, and I kind of nodded, haha, yeah, you're right. And then I was thinking about it the next week. So I was like, why not? You
Why
know,
not?
why
Right.
can't I have a crush
Yeah.
hour instead of it being my whole day? You know, and I started breaking it down. And now I have this tool that at any point I'm feeling depressed or something like that, I'm like, oh, I know why. It's because I'm putting things off that I need to do,
Oh
and then
yeah, big
smash
time.
that shit. And
Yeah.
it's been a game changer, man.
Well, I tell when we go through our planning stuff with our guys, I tell them there's really two ways to approach your planning for the day. And then I'll get back to that question about
Yeah.
that time. But and you really have to know yourself to decide which way you should choose. And we change from day to day. So the two ways you can tackle your to-do list are to either do the easiest thing first or the hardest thing first.
Hmm.
Like those are the two ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so if you're feeling like you're down and maybe you're lacking energy and you don't have any enthusiasm, then what I would say is do the easiest thing first.
Right. Just get some X's on there.
Yep, just get some X's, like you said, dopamine, get a win, you start building up some momentum. But then there's other days you wake up and you're like, hell yeah, like I'm on a roll, like I'm ready to go, I'm feeling good, I slept good, maybe I had sex with my wife last night, like things are awesome right now. And then in that case you do the hardest thing first,
Cool.
and because you have the energy to do it. And we know scientifically that your willpower is fleeting throughout the day, so you're going to deplete that as you go. So you have to decide, for yourself what's going to work. But either one is good. Whatever's going to move the needle, that's what you should do.
Yeah.
But to go back to, well, actually, there was one other. I'm taking notes as you guys are writing.
Yeah.
So
Go.
you guys were talking about the efficiency, like the crush day, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
So Tim Ferriss introduced me to this concept, and I'll probably butcher it because I've tweaked it a little bit and thought a lot about it. One thing he talks about is like maximum efficiency, and how you can get a lot more done than you think you can. And so one of the questions that bounces around in my brain is, you take a task that you might think is going to last you or take you 5 hours, and you're like, what if I got this done in 2 hours?
Nice.
What would I need to do in order to get that thing done in 2 hours? And
Yep.
so when before I started Order of Man, I was doing financial planning, and I made a decision towards the latter stages of owning my financial planning practice that I was going to take Friday afternoon off at 2 in the afternoon. So I'd cut 3 hours out of Friday. And I was thinking, well, my work on Friday is going to suffer, and Fridays aren't going to be super productive, but that's okay because, we've built our practice, and I can be home with the family, and I can extend my weekend. Like, this is good. This is a good thing. And I was willing to make that trade. So I made the trade, and I said, I'm going to leave it too. So I started leaving it to closing up the shop in the office at 2:00 on Friday afternoon, knowing that my production was going to go down. Well, actually the exact opposite happened. My Friday production improved. It increased. I'm like, wait, what? How can this be? I just cut out, 30%, 40% of my day, and my production is going up. Right. Because we waste so much time throughout the day. And I can't remember what principle it is, but your production is allotted towards the time allowed.
Yeah.
So if you give yourselves 8 hours to do something, it's going to take you 8 hours to do it.
Yeah. That's right.
I tease my wife about this with Christmas, because I'm like, hey, look, she's like, I'm done with Christmas shopping. I'm like, no, you're done with Christmas shopping on Christmas morning when it's Christmas. So if you start 2 months early, all it means is you're going to spend more money. If you start 2 weeks before Christmas, you're going to spend less money, but it's going to be done on the same time frame. And so if you have 2 hours to do something, you're going to get it done because that's all you have to do it. So that time crunching or collapsing is a really valuable strategy too.
Dude, it also speaks, and I'm talking a lot about ADD because it's new to me in the sense that I'm finally able to I finally found the education around it and tactics and things like that. And one of the things that an ADD brain thrives off of is a sense of urgency. Like there's something that comes online in our brain when it's like, hey, dude, you got to get this shit done now. And I found the same thing. Like when there is an imminent deadline that needs to happen, it is a drop dead moment. It's pass fail at that moment. It gets done. Like there's nothing that
Yeah, you're
doesn't
gonna
get
get it
like
done.
forgotten about. And
Right.
that's I've given myself those kinds of things too. Like if I can give myself this little let's do it right then and there, it always goes through. The other thing that it just seems so silly how simple it is. The way you phrased it was, how do I want to feel at the end of the day?
Yeah.
And my wife and I used to teach a intimacy marriage course. It's how we started our business, Romance and Adventure, 6 years ago. And one of the things I had asked her in early days of our marriage was, we woke up one morning, it was like a Saturday or Sunday, I can't remember. And I said to her, what do I need to do today, starting from this moment on, so that I know we're gonna have sex tonight? And she laughed at me and she
It's a
started
good
like
question.
rattling off the most mundane things you could possibly imagine in the house. She's like, the bills need to be paid, the house needs to be clean, the kids need to be da da da. Like it was just like real normal practical things. I started calling that stuff all day foreplay because I realized like the more we can get those things that are taking up the bandwidth in the back of our minds that we're not even aware how much restraint it's putting on certain things in our life, like intimacy and marriage,
Yeah.
and just smacking that out, getting it done, how much more freedom it allows other things to come up. The woodland creature of desire within marriage, everything's got to be still.
Yeah.
The conditions need to be right for the wild animal to appear. but
Well,
it made me think of how do I want to finish the day? And I'm like, it's funny that I've had that one framework over there, but not for myself for a long time, like if I'm honest. So it got me,
yeah.
dude. Appreciate that.
Well, I might take a little bit counter to that position you said about your wife, because I think and I'll tell you why, because I think
And
a
that
lot
was
of
then. That
guys,
was 6 years ago. In
no, I
that
get
day,
it.
on that day.
Yeah, and I get where you're coming from. I just want to put this word of caution because I've seen it in so many men. They'll make themselves a whipping boy
Oh,
in order to get
totally.
laid,
Oh, big time.
right?
Yeah.
So what I would say is maybe to put that on its head a little bit. Same outcome, but what can I do? What kind of man do I need to be where she can't keep her hands off me?
Yeah. That's
Right?
interesting because
Or
I started asking myself the same question a
Yeah.
few years ago. Like,
that's a difference.
what
Yeah.
would I need to be in order to be irresistible?
That's
That's
cool.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
Because
better than saying, hey, what I need to do in order to get lucky tonight? Because then
Yeah.
she'll just give you her honeydew
she's like,
list and you'll
huh.
be fixing the toilet and painting the bathroom and
Yeah. Yeah.
doing all
And
the
if
bullshit.
totally, and I grew up in a religious culture where I was told you need to let go of all your identity and serve others. And there is some value. There's a lot of value in serving others, but not to the impact of your own identity and your own self, which I'll be frank, I did. I lost
Yeah,
a
I think
marriage.
a lot of us have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you're
Codependence.
bringing that up because it's so easy to lose ourselves in others because we think somehow, whether it's getting laid or some word that they may say, that something we'll do something that they will cause them to affirm us into wholeness. And that is a lie. That is,
Well, and Ryan's point is
For
yeah.
sure.
definitely taken, and I know you take it
Yeah.
also. And I'm not saying you're saying the opposite of this, Ryan,
Oh,
but like Morgan,
my
Ron's
wife.
wife, I know her well enough to know, and your relationship with, to know that she was answering the question of those things actually arouse me. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, she
I think
wasn't
I
doing,
feel the subtlety in all this. Like I'm not, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
But I think,
Well,
I mean, I
and
think
I
Ryan's
like what
actually
you're saying.
calling out a strong and needed
agreed.
warning to men. Like, hey, like
Yeah,
it's a slippery slope.
Yeah, because here's what a lot of guys do. They throw themselves on the altar of service,
Yep,
right?
Hmm.
And so they
done that.
think, well, they're gonna slit their own throat to serve other people. And while you may have served one person temporarily by doing that, imagine what it would look like if you, instead of throwing yourself on the altar of sacrifice, decided that you're going to take care of yourself to the maximum,
Yep.
not to the extreme, not to sacrifice other people, but to the maximum, how many more people can be served by you doing that? You know, if I bust my ass all day, every day, and I just wear myself down because I tell myself, well, I'm serving my wife and kids, man, I'm going to burn up and burn out. But if on the other hand, I learn to take care of myself, I go to jujitsu, I eat what I'm supposed to be eating, I read good books, I put good information in my head, I visualize, I do goal setting like we were talking about earlier. Man, I can serve them so much better and so much longer because I'm able. It's the old adage of, putting it's trite at this point, but putting your face mask on before you put other people's face mask on. That's what we're talking about here. Right?
Yeah. Absolutely. What were you about to say, Daniel?
Well, it's a bit of a pivot, but I think we've got about 25 left. And part of me wants to avoid this topic, but I also want to dive into it. And I'm curious, I was listening, it's around the term toxic masculinity. And I was listening to some of your content, Ryan, around that term. And I liked that you had some firm opinions and a take on it. And I would just like to explore that take if you're up for it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, probably what you're referring to is that I despise that term and I don't use that.
That was
term.
Part of the take for sure.
And I think that those who use it for the most part, not exclusively, but for the most part, have malicious intent around how they're using that word. I don't think everybody, or that phrase, I don't think everybody feels that way, but I think it's a word or a phrase that is easily manipulated to achieve an objective, which is to undermine masculinity. That's what I think.
A lot of times I have a feeling about something before I understand why I have that feeling. And I've called this thing my intuition. And it's not just feeling, it's past understandings, educations, decisions, beliefs, emotion, literal education, intellectual, all equaling, a sense of something. And my sense of that word is I just don't like this term and I don't really know why. And so I've been trying to put some articulation around that. And what I've come up with at this stage is essentially when someone uses the term toxic masculinity, they are talking about a set of behaviors that are not healthy for people. And to have that term end up being connected to men so strongly, I think is non sequitur. It doesn't make sense. And then that equals, which I agree with your take on it. I don't think this is a good term. I don't think it's people saying what they really mean. And so looking up and deciding what we're really trying to say when we use that term, I think is important. And I'm curious if you've ever considered that or if that's around.
I think a lot about this. Most of my day is consumed with thinking about masculinity and
have you ever considered?
As it should.
Yeah.
As after all, it is your job.
Right. So it's not only my job, it's like I'm trying to become a more effective man. Like this is my life. This is what I want to become. Okay. So in order to debate a topic, you need to see both sides of it. Like you don't have to agree with both sides, but you certainly need to be able to see both sides. Otherwise you can't debate intelligently about it. So I've been thinking about it and I've had a hardline stance about the term toxic masculinity and why I despise it. Okay. If I'm being honest, I see what other people are saying. I understand what they're saying. Yeah. If you're using masculine traits, which I think we would all agree could be aggression, dominance, competitiveness, the propensity for violence. I think we could all agree that those are generally those are masculine traits. Okay. And if you're using those traits to hurt or harm or exploit or take advantage of other people, then yeah, that's an issue. I have an issue with that. Is that toxic? I guess if you're using it in that phrase, sure, I can agree with that. I don't think everybody is. Okay, so I've been thinking about this a lot lately. And in order to illustrate my point about this, it's best to work in frameworks. So here's my thought. We have three different terms that are kind of like thrown around interchangeably and nobody really knows what they mean. And that this is why language is important, so we can know what we're talking about. So there's the term male, there's the term masculine, and there's the term man or manly or manliness. Those are synonymous. So here's my framework. You have a male, okay? A male is a biological male. Like there's the male version of the species and a female version. As Homo sapiens, you're either male or female. Now, some people say, what about intersex? Okay, well, that's a biological anomaly. That doesn't equal a third sex or a third gender. It's male or female, and anything that falls outside of that is an anomaly. It's a mistake. It's not normal, okay? But there's male and there's female. It's only biology. It's chromosomes, it's DNA, it's your biological makeup. Next, we have masculinity. Masculinity is a set of characteristics that we attribute to males, biological males, because it's ingrained into us via the way that we've been created and or evolved, however you want to look at it. But competitiveness, men are bigger, we're stronger, we're more aggressive, we're more dominant, we're more competitive. These are masculine traits, and that is masculinity. Now, here's the interesting thing. Masculinity is amoral. It's neither good nor bad. It just is. It's not toxic. It's not amazing. It's not God's gift to whatever. Like, it's just masculinity. That's it. And this is where everybody else gets it wrong. And when I say everybody else, I'm talking like everybody else. They either think masculinity is toxic or masculinity is amazing. It's the most wonderful thing. It's not. What defines a man is how he uses his masculinity. It's how we harness our ability to be violent, our ability to be aggressive, our ability to be competitive, our ability to be dominant. And if we're using that for productive outcomes for ourselves and other people, then we are acting as men. Now we're being manly. So there's a difference between male, masculinity, and manliness. And that's the difference, how we're utilizing our masculine characteristics. For example, when my oldest son, who's 13 years old, doesn't get what he wants, he's got the testosterone coursing through his veins now. He's hitting puberty, he's exhibiting masculine behavior characteristics, but he's not acting like a man most of the time because he gets mad or he punches his brother. Like, he's using it in non-productive ways. It's my job to help him harness that masculinity for productive outcomes so he can turn himself from a boy to a man. I actually prefer the term immature more than I prefer toxic masculinity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because there's a level of immaturity in how a lot of men are using their masculinity.
I think
It's a good differentiation.
I do. Yeah.
Yes.
It's really cool to hear someone who has a lot of clarity in their words and has thought a lot about these words and made decisions about what each means, and then distinct, and then can say that's the good work, in my opinion. One thing I'd probably be remiss if I didn't take a small issue with it, and I'm curious what you think if we teased it out a little bit more, is it sounds a little harsh and potentially not true to call intersex a mistake. Is that something that you would stand by?
Yeah, I would. And here's why. Whether you're a creationist or an evolutionist, let's take evolution. What is the function of a species?
You're saying to reproduce?
Is there any other function outside of that? To evolve and reproduce. So that's an anomaly. Look, if mistake is the word that you don't, that's the word that you're hung up on, not you personally, but people might hear and take issue with. I mean, use a different word, but I think we can all agree that that's an anomaly that is outside of the normal, like that. There's no other way to say it,
It's rare. It seems to be pretty rare. And I hear you.
It is rare.
I think that when you said that, is there any other purpose than for a species than to reproduce and evolve? You added evolve on there. And it seems to me that evolution beyond physical, our mental, cognitive, dare I say spiritual, that's a pretty vague term I usually stay away from, but evolving in the mysterious way that is connected to, the cosmos. People call that spirituality. I think that all of the people who are born and however they're born seem to help that, evolution too. But I think I was getting a little hung up on the word mistake, because that implies that there's something wrong with that, which I think
I
could
mean,
be a little harsh.
look, yes, I see what you're saying, and I'll nod to that, And so when I say that, let me be very clear on that. I'm not dismissing a human being's worth.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you have an individual who's intersex, and it is very rare, but let's say you do.
I appreciate that you know that term, because not a lot of people do, as I understand it.
Look, I'm not going to dismiss that person as a human being, as somebody who has worth to offer. When I say mistake, like even if you take it just from the evolutionary standpoint, that is outside of the norm. That isn't within the standard operating system. That's what I'm saying when I say mistake. I'm saying that's a biological anomaly, meaning it's not supposed to happen. It does, right? It does. But that's the point that I'm making when I say
I appreciate, I heard, and thanks for addressing that. This is one of the reasons that it's a triggering term, toxic masculinity. And I just think it's triggering like a lot of, or inflaming of emotions. A lot of words are doing that, because these words are pretty clunky, and they also can mean different things to different people. And so I find a lot of value in deciphering what they mean. Curious what you mean. What do I mean by that? And then, maybe when I say the word toxic masculine, when I think about that, I know what people are referring to. I know what I want to refer to. Maybe I can take 3 or 4 other words and put them in that term's place that is a little bit more clear about what we're really talking about. What do you think, Ron?
For me, I can't speak for anybody else. I want to speak for other people, but I won't. For me, I was just thinking about that phrase, toxic masculinity, and trying to think about, like, when did I hear that? What did I think about it? What do I still think about it? Like, what comes up for me in my mind? And I mean, quite honestly, what comes up for me in my mind is my dad. And it was a person who was violent, who was racist, who was misogynist, who was a liar, cheated on all of his wives, was married 8 times. Is he the definition of toxic masculinity? In my brain, he is. There are, and so I'm kind of thinking, like, what are we carrying to the conversation?
But then in Ryan's terms, if I understand them correctly,
Yeah.
that would be someone who's male, has masculinity, a lot of it, and is not being manly.
Yeah. And he was
Correct.
not being manly in that
That's
situation.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. And that's the point. Look, so let's take a couple of those scenarios. He cheated. Well, women cheat. He was a racist. Well, some women are racist. Like those some of those things you're saying. Now, violence, okay, that's a little different, because that's generally you're going to see that more in men than you are. Like if you look at crime statistics and crime rates, the majority of violent crime is committed by men. So that's a more of a masculine characteristic. But some of the other characteristics aren't toxic masculinity. Is it toxic behavior? Sure. Yeah. Cheating on somebody, being disloyal, thinking that somebody else is less than you because of immutable characteristics. Yeah, that's horrible behavior, but that isn't masculine. Masculinity.
Yeah. It's
maybe
so easy to mistake. I mean, I was thinking, I loved what you said about immaturity, because it would be more accurate to say he was immature in a lot of his life, rather than blanketly saying he was, a toxic masculine person.
Right. And definitely,
let's take racism, for example.
Yeah.
Okay. So, 300 years ago, every single human being on the planet was a racist. Okay. 300 years ago, that's not that long ago, but we've matured, right? Like, we understand that just because of the color of somebody's skin doesn't make them inferior or non-human, but we've matured. Like it's a mature level of thinking. It's an evolved level of thinking, right? So we got to be careful of lumping all these things in as just being toxic masculine. Are there men who are acting in inappropriate ways? Yes. Is it toxic masculinity? I don't know. It depends on what it is you're talking about. If you're talking about being disloyal, well, I know plenty of women who have been disloyal. Women tend to show it differently than men. You know, men might be more prone to get into a physical altercation. Women might be more prone to be manipulative, but it's still the same, you know, the same deal, just different
Selfishness in some level.
strategies.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just
Right.
having one term that's inherently pointing toward men and then putting all of these characteristics in it is
Yeah.
just not, it just doesn't work, you know, and it's inflaming what seems to be a divisiveness, or at least a conflict and friction between generally men and women, or more male people and more feminine
Yeah.
women. It's just, it needs some work.
And I think it also makes our maleness an immediate handicap in the eyes of the other, right? Because
That's the design. That's by design.
yeah, I mean, oh, you mean with the phrase, like when they came up with the phrase
That's
toxic
the
masculinity?
point.
Yeah.
The whole point. And people will say, well, no, Ryan, nobody's talking about that. Really? Why don't you go look at the American Psychological Association's quasi study on the fact that dominance, competitiveness, aggression, and stoicism, what they consider masculine characteristics, are inherently dangerous and destructive to young boys.
Yeah,
that's the American Psychological Association. That's the association. The work they do is largely responsible for the way that we treat our young children in society, whether or not we treat them, how we treat them, medication, all of this, prescriptions, all of this kind of stuff. And the American Psychological Association is saying that those characteristics are inherently destructive and damaging to our young boys. That's a problem.
And those are 4 things that you listed that could be super strengths. Stoicism in the right person, in the right, expressed in a way that can be so helpful to the person, to the people around them. You know, those are all, like you said, those are neutral qualities that can go one way or another to varying extents in one way or another, you know.
That's right.
That's tough to hear. Anyways, I know we're kind of getting close, you know, and I don't want to take it too long, but I really, really appreciate you addressing that situation with us. On this podcast, we've spoken to a lot of women. We've spoken to a lot of men. I think we've done a pretty good job of addressing masculinity, femininity, and it's been challenging to talk about. And with someone like yourself, I really admire how we were talking earlier before you jumped on. It seems like you've really picked a lane. You know your lane, you know who you are, you're refining that, you're voicing that. That is a value of mine. I know it's a value of Ronald's. And to see someone being very clear and have a good heart around this, but be very clear, you know, that is a really attractive, and I value that a lot. And
thank you.
At the same time, to be able to talk about something like masculinity and terms like toxic masculinity with nuance and with forethought, and where the heart is still leading that, you know, that's even more of a value. And I think that that's the good work. And I'm glad you're doing it.
I appreciate it. I have a question for you guys.
Yeah.
So cutting for sign, like I know that because I spent some time with hunters and border patrol agents when they're looking for, you know, they're driving down the road and they're looking for sign, whether it's human activity or animal activity. So like, where does cutting for sign, where does that come from?
Same place.
Okay. But do you guys have experience in that? Or
I mean, I grew up as an outdoorsman. I was an archer as a young man.
Okay.
I'm an archer again, you know, plenty of hunting seasons in my life.
Ron's got a really, really good shot. I've seen him shoot.
Awesome. You know, I'm a member of my local, you know, archery club and all that stuff. It's a metaphor for me, man. I'm probably more poetic in the masculine world, and I think of my journey as through metaphor quite a bit. And I'm hunting me. I'm looking for the best version of me, and I'm as hot on his tails as I've ever been in my life right now.
Okay.
And
That's
this is a self-serving podcast for me.
Yeah.
Because obviously my dad's example was not fantastic. And, you know, my stepdad was a closeted homosexual who thought by bearing my mother, he would somehow get fixed. And 8 years of their 15 15-year marriage, he was living a double life. So I had poor examples of how to be authentic and responsible. And I've had to do a lot of parenting to myself and a lot of hunting for the kind of character and the kind of person I want to be. And the tough thing is, man, and this is a mistake I made big time, was the opposite of the North Pole is the South Pole. You go from one cold and shitty place to another cold and shitty place. So I thought if I could be the opposite, you really challenged me with the idea of toxic masculinity, because, and I won't get into, because I know you've got time here, but I thought, man, if I could just be the opposite, whoop, I'm going to be okay. But instead, I completely lost all those values, those things that you named by the Psychological American Association. I was 30 something years old before I realized I had to really start to find those things, hone those things, work on those things. And so this last, season, 7, 8 years of my life has been, 8 years really, maybe a bit longer, is reclaiming those things in my life. And I do that through conversations, through things I read, through things I listen to, through taking care of myself. And it's the path, man. It's I'm hunting every day. Every moment I'm hunting.
Yeah,
Looking for
Ryan,
that better version of myself.
when we wanted to start this, Ron came up with that name pretty quickly. And it was us wanting to talk to people who had cut for sign in their life, who had followed the meaningful things and become a better version. And then but we kept questioning, what does this mean? What is this? How we like this? This feels good. And then what happened was we ended up finding ourselves more little missing pieces, that little twig that gets you a little more on the right track. We would find that more and more through the people we would talk with, have on. And then we started to realize, oh, we're cutting for sign on this show. Like this is the best way. This is one of the best ways to do it. And then that infected the rest of our life more. And now Ron and I talk about cut for sign. We'll mention that term 10 times a day in our communications. I'll be like, I was cutting for sign earlier today. When I had this conversation, I realized, little blind spot, just got a little more light on it. I got a little whiff. Yep. That's where I need to go. And so, not to say we're a feather for every wind that blows, I'm not looking from something for you that I'm missing. But it's something that is a little bit toward that, in a really what feels like a healthy way. We don't now then talk to someone who has an opposite opinion of you and then go, oh yeah, no, that's what I really, that's not what we're talking about. There's a narrowing and a heightened sense of pursuit that has happened over the last year in the 51 episodes we've done now. And we're on to something. And that something, independent of each other, has been a just more fully expressed, owned version of ourselves.
I love it, man. I love it. That's awesome. I was going to say something, Ron, about when you're talking about being a poet. And I think a lot of the times, there's certain things that we would say are like not masculine, and it typically revolves around the arts, is what I found, whether it's, poetry or painting, you guys are talking about earlier, or cooking, like I've heard guys say, well, cooking is not masculine. This got nothing to do with masculinity.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Being a man. So here's how I define it. Being a man is being able to protect, provide, and preside for yourself and the people you love, and even people that can't do it for themselves.
Yeah.
And so I know artists, I know musicians, I know painters, I know professional cooks, things that people would say are, that's not masculine, that are more manly than so many of these others that complain about it, because they're the ones putting food on the table. They're the ones providing, they're the ones shining light. They're the ones serving their communities and serving their families. And so I always want to put that out there, because I always get the question of, like, I had this guy the other day reach out and he's like, hey, Ryan, I really want to learn how to cook and I really like it and I enjoy it, but I'm worried it's not a masculine behavior or a manly thing to do. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like cooking isn't gendered. Painting isn't poetry isn't gendered. Like, it's a matter of protecting, providing, and presiding. That's what makes you a man, however you decide to do it.
Yeah.
Man, thank you for your time. Appreciate
you, Ryan.
Appreciate it, guys. Great
Thanks for the
conversation today. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, man. Take care. Okay.
Will do.
All right. Field dressing. Hey, Ryan Michler was on. That was fun, dude. That was an interesting conversation.
Yeah. How so?
I was thinking about how I differentiate from him over my approach to masculinity. And
Yeah.
I loved like how he was able to articulate around maleness or male masculinity. I'm going to kind of mess this up here. And
Manliness.
manliness. Yeah. Yeah. And I appreciate his, like you said at the very beginning, and a couple times, his lane. Like he's like strongly in that lane,
Yeah.
and I appreciate that. I know that for me, I've so, because this is just my personality more than anything else. Like I am into paradox. I am into nuance. I am into like all the notes going on in between the melody of a piece, and so like I tend not to get too excited about the culture that is kind of organizing around the way he teaches. I don't want to say his culture.
Yeah.
There's kind of a larger Western one, and but I've also realized that there's a lot of value, man. Like he was giving me a ton of value, and I know that it's my own immaturity, which is really my resentment towards my dad and the culture I grew up with, that just says if it looks like that, smells like that, then there can't be any value over there,
Yeah.
and that's simply not the case. So
Yeah. Look at his eyes.
yeah,
Look at his body language. He cares a lot about people,
he
you
really
know?
does. He cares about, like I was thinking about this too, is that he look, if you find something that saves your life and provides for you, like
Mm,
and creates a better life for you, you're gonna do it and you're gonna
yeah.
protect it and you're gonna honor it. And he's doing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we all, I need to understand and have started to more and more that just because someone's message isn't, packaged in a way and all
Yeah.
the words aren't said, what are they trying to do? What's their intention? And I usually get that through their tone of voice, some of the topics that they're willing to go into,
Yeah.
how they respond to questions, body language, all of it. And we've had people on here where I'm like, oh, I don't know how much they are really trying to help other people. And
Mm,
to be honest, I don't know the extent to which I'm trying to help other
mm,
people.
mm.
But I can tell, I think I can tell with him,
Yeah.
with you, you guys care a lot about people and you want the best for the people around you. I think that he is helping a group of people, probably a growing group of people,
Yeah.
be better humans.
Yeah.
And
Certainly.
it's very easy if his message doesn't fit your style, if his words and some of the things he says seem straight up counter and violent, it's very easy to go, he cancel him, he's
Sure.
awful. And it's like, pump the brakes, man. Like, he's trying and he's doing a good job,
He's doing a great job. I mean, there's the whole thing to it. Like he's doing a lot of deep work. I don't
Yeah,
want to discount how big or deep it is.
yeah. And there's things that he said that I find pretty harsh, like calling people who are intersex a mistake. I would never do that. And
Yeah.
I think people would be pretty damn offended by that. And to be honest, rightly so.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he
For sure.
also, you ask him to tease that one out a little bit, and he's like, "Yeah, I hear you. That's not the
Yeah.
best word. I
Yeah.
meant
Yeah.
this." And then there's other people who would say the word anomaly would be too much, and they'd be offended by that.
Yeah.
And if I just feel like, listen, the guy's willing to talk. He's choosing his lane. He's getting better. Like,
Mm-hmm.
this guy's not your enemy.
Yeah.
And I think that this person's my enemy ethos, or habit, hair trigger way to respond to someone is it's overused and it's causing problems. Like, look in someone's eyes and be like, would this
Yeah.
person save my ass if I was in trouble? And if
Yeah.
the answer is not a no, then they're not your enemy.
Yeah.
Then have
Yeah.
a conversation and work some terminology out.
Yeah. Yeah.
you know
Yeah, man, we covered some good stuff, and I'm challenged by a couple things he said in a great way. One
yeah,
was because I came into the conversation knowing I'm looking for more structure in my life.
yeah, he's
Dude,
got
that
that,
was, I mean,
Jesus.
come on, man. Like that fact that I called that out, I said I'm looking for it, and then it, that was spelled out really well. I mean, that felt awesome.
Yeah,
And so
good.
his like doing it in the morning and the night. I mean, that's the challenge for me, is like, don't let my head hit the pillow till I know what's going on the next day. I don't
Good
want to
call,
waste my
man.
day. Yeah. And then visualizing how he wants to feel by the end of the day.
Yeah.
That was great because I often let the tail wag the dog on how I end up feeling based on did I get my list done or not. And if I think like, well, if I want to like fall asleep feeling great and accomplished and fill in the blank with whatever other feelings I want, then what would that and then back that out? That was great. That was really, really
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
Yeah. He's got his shit together. It's pretty awesome to
He sure
see,
does. Yeah.
you know? And even when I feel like I wanted to go into like, what are your little soft spots, man? What are you really challenged with? And he's kind of like, no, I mean, I just crush them. It's like, God damn it. Okay.
Yeah, and I think that's okay. Like I think that sometimes my wife and I we joke about like we wish we were, and I'm not saying this is what Ryan is. This is not what I'm saying Ryan is, but like I wish our brains we talk about like we wish we were dumber in the sense that we like aren't thinking about so much other stuff and it could just be simpler like just narrow our focus down a lot so
You're
that
saying that Ryan Michler's dumber than you are, and that makes it easier?
he's in his
Wow, you're
lane.
a dick.
He's in his lane, and it is easy for me to jump all like through 16 lanes of traffic to
Totally,
try to hit
man.
the exit.
I hear you. He does. He's got. I love how he thinks about things and wants to work out words and definitions and meanings
Yeah,
and categorize it. That's awesome, man.
yeah,
More of that,
yeah,
definitely. He doesn't seem like he's in his head but he might be. He might be as in his head as anybody. But
yeah.
he's definitely got some of the reins around it, and to do so with all the responsibility it's something I'm personally challenged by.
Hmm.
Part of me thinks I need to simplify my life a lot. Part of me it needs the complexity of being involved in a few different things. And I like the challenge of them each finding their little place that
Yeah,
fits, and that's all supports. Um, but for the you and the Ryans of the world who have a wife and a partner and kids and also businesses that are on the back of their shoulders and their shoulders essentially alone,
yeah,
that's a lot of pressure, man. And to do so and not be in constant fight or flight and have that parasympathetic nervous system still, calm nervous
yeah,
system base, that's amazing. And especially to do it in a society that is metal and plastic tossed salad, fucking cars ripping all over the world. It's like
yeah,
what you and him are doing, you're doing pretty similar things.
yeah.
It's incredible that you aren't going fucking bonkers.
I mean, I was listening to one of his
Or are
talks.
you?
By the hair of my chinny chin chin. Like I hearing him talk about how much he trains. I mean,
Mm,
I'm sure he's interested in progressing. And we could have probably had a whole other hour of talking just about that. But there's probably, my guess, this is a wild guess, is there's probably a lot of mental relief from that kind of thing, and which allows him to be
huge.
able to get back into there.
Yeah,
It's
good call. But you got to do it
yeah,
all day long. You got to
yeah,
do the right thing all day long to succeed at the level that you all are succeeding at. And it's like, what do I need now? Oh, I need to literally like do 20 push-ups in my bedroom right now just to get out of my fucking head
yeah.
10% more so
Do
I can
that.
go do this. It's just
Yeah,
like you got to be a ninja.
yeah, yeah. I mean, one of my greatest things is just turn off my damn phone, plug it in the other room, leave.
Really.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, not near my bed. Don't wake up next to it. Don't fall asleep next to it.
Well,
It's hard.
as we sign off here, I
Yeah.
wanted to say that I really respect that you led in with just being like, "Hey, man, I'm kind of jealous of you," and I thought that was very leveling of the playing field, and you putting yourself out there more and more. And I think that you're not trying to pretend to be something you're not, and in doing
Mm.
that, you seem to be attracting more of the clients and success that you're really looking for. And it's something I admire and value.
Oh, thanks, man. I had to say it, not for anybody else, but for me.
Fuck yeah, I know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Smart.
Yeah. 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 Thanks, man. Appreciate that. Thanks for putting this together. I know we have different roles for this podcast, and one of the roles that you have is handling the relationships with our guests, and it's a lot of work. It's a lot of follow up, and I really appreciate you, man. It's no joke, and it's cool to see who's coming on. Like I've known about him. He's a little bit of a celebrity in the men's world and men's work world, and it's cool to get to talk to him, and it's cool to watch him do his thing. And the conversation was brought to you today by Daniel Penner Cline. They all are.
Awesome. All right, man. Love you, brother.
All right, love you too, man. Talk to you later.